just across the water from the busy ports of Hull and Immingham and down the road from Grimsby. And if you're still a little unclear on the geography, I can also tell you that we're actually on the line of the Greenwich Meridian, established in 1884 as quite literally 0 degrees of longitude, the place where east meets west. Cleethorpes was a creation of the 19th century, the result of the Victorian discovery of the seaside. And although it may not appear so on an out-of-season day like today, I'm told that its popularity has hardly waned, despite the competition of Spanish sun and package tours. Cleethorpes boasts a long and fine sandy beach, at the end of which stands a modern leisure centre, and that's where we've set up our cameras today. Joining us this week on the pottery and porcelain tables are the father and son team of Henry and John Sandon, along with David Batty. And they're joined this week by Pamela Rowan, who we're welcoming to the Roadshow for the first time. While over on pictures, we welcome back Josephine Fitzalan Howard, who's with Stephen Somerville. And John Bly's face lit up when he first saw the furniture a little while ago. So let's now join our experts with the people of Cleethorpes.
Well, I got the poodles in 1971.
This pair of poodles?
Yes.
Yeah. Yes, they're great fun, aren't they?
Yes, they're lovely.
Have you always liked poodles?
Yes, I've had poodles of my own,
Yeah.
and that started me off.
Oh,
yes.
I sympathise because my wife's got one.
Yes.
I know what it's
Yes.
like. They take over a house, don't
That's
they?
right, yes.
And a collection of poodles is great fun. And how much did you pay for them
I
then?
paid £25 in an auction.
For the
and my
two?
husband nearly had a heart attack.
Did he really?
He said, they're not ours. He went white.
Oh.
And I said, yes, I want them.
Well, that was quite cheap for them at that stage.
Yes.
Nowadays, well, you put a nought on the end of that.
Yes.
A lot of people call them Rockingham because they've got this this scrappy clay
bought
on
them
them,
for
but
Rockingham.
in fact, never did Rockingham put this scrap
Oh.
clay on. A very typically a Staffordshire kind of a thing. As also, I mean, this group, Poodle with its babies. I think it's absolutely lovely, that. And then this is a bit out of the ordinary. This is poodles. This is flying swans, isn't it?
Yes, a very dear friend gave me that as a
Did she?
keepsake, yes.
Yes. Unfortunately, it's been damaged.
Yes, and I did it.
What do you mean you did it?
I damaged it.
You didn't?
Yes,
How
I
did you do that?
Knocked it off the windowsill.
Knocked it off the windowsill. Oh, you naughty girl. Dear, I ought to come and punish you
Yes.
for that.
Yes.
The RSPCP will be after you. The Royal Society of Prevention of Cruelty to Porcelain
That's right.
will be after you. You probably know it's Sir Worcester.
Yes, yes.
It's got the factory mark on the bottom.
That's right.
And the date code of 12 dots gives us a date of 1903. And it's signed by the artist,
Yes.
C. Baldwin, C.H.C. Baldwin, Charles Henry Clifford Baldwin,
Yes.
who was one of the finest Worcester artists of all time, specialising in these lovely swans flying on a matte blue ground.
Yes.
This is a super piece. His work is highly collectible. So, if that were perfect, I suppose you're looking at a pot that's worth around about £1,400 now. Now, do you know what you've done to it? You brought it down to about, well, still about £200–250. It's still lovely, but you watch out. Don't
Yes.
you damage our poodles, will you? Or the RSPCP will call.
Yeah.
Well, now here we have a tea urn, and it has this extraordinary business of 2 taps, which
Yes.
I'm sure people have seen before. I don't think I've ever seen one. You've had this long?
Well, I've had it personally over 40 years, but it has been in the family.
Oh, right.
I don't know how long.
Yes, right. Well, it's made in Sheffield plate.
Yes.
That is silver fused onto copper, with this very, very fine detail. The beading here and everything is very, very fine. I date this myself round about 1795 to 1800, something like that. Lovely green-stained ivory here, plain ivory there, and it says on one tea and the other water.
Yes.
And if you look inside, you have this huge circular receptacle in the center, which usually holds an iron rod just for keeping the tea hot. But instead of this has a little hole going down to the water
Yes.
nozzle, whereas the outside skin has the hole going to the tea nozzle. So I can only assume that you had relatively strong tea here.
Yes.
And then what wanted it strong, had it strong, and then what wanted it weak, you
Watered
took
it
some
down.
water out as well. So
Yeah.
I think it's extremely clever. I've never seen one before. I love it. I think it's absolutely marvellous.
Yes.
Do you ever use it?
No, never.
Well, it looks a bit grubby inside.
Well,
doesn't it?
what I have done, I usually use it for flowers.
That's lovely.
It
Yes, yes.
is a beautiful piece.
Well,
to
every
show for flowers.
detail about it is absolutely super. It's a wonderful bit of old Sheffield plate. I would have thought that it is somewhere between £1,500 and £2,000 for it.
It's not as old as it looks. No. And that's really what makes it much more interesting. It's actually one of those quite unusual, very good quality, pure reproductions.
Is it really?
Absolutely throughout. The carving, the inlay, the distressing, and you'll see it's scratched and marked all over, but rather too evenly. And when we open the door, the cupboard, pin hinge is fine, but you'll see it's almost as dirty and as marked and scratched inside as outside. And that's the first guide, and you have to look very carefully. You see from the back, it's not just a repro, like a copy, it is a reproduction in every detail. And the back has old boards, old handmade nails. It is done in perfect copy of a late Elizabethan cupboard. So, to all intents and purposes, it's exactly what it should look like, but it is not of the period. It's made in the period between 1890 and about 1910, just before the First World War. It nevertheless, as an example of its type, is very interesting. It is quite a valuable item still. I suppose in this condition, which is extremely good, it would cost you to replace somewhere around about £2,500 to £3,000.
Well, this is a charming, colourful picture, which I see is signed down there in the lower right-hand corner by an artist called Frans van Severdonk, and it's also helpfully dated 1866. He was a Belgian artist, in fact, who painted in the middle of the 19th century. He was a pupil of a very famous artist, also Belgian, called Eugene Verbeekhoven, who painted very much this sort of scene, farmyard scenes, poultry scenes, sheep and cattle, always animal pictures. This is quite unusual in that it's on panel, it's on one piece of wood.
Yes.
And it's beautifully detailed, which is what I love about it so much. So you can see here that the feathers, even the tiny little feathers are shown, and all the little blades of grass. It's a little bit naive in the way it's painted. You can see the perspective, the whole thing is slightly tipped forward. He hasn't quite got that right, but I think that's almost the charm of the painting, its naivety. And tell me, has it been in your family a long time?
It belonged to my father, and it was given to him approximately 25 to 30 years ago by his brother. But I don't know where it came from prior to that.
Right. The paintwork looks wonderful. It's very thick, and it's in very good state. I think it would benefit from a light clean, actually. I think the colours would come up even stronger. It's got a little bit of a soupy finish to it, which is from discoloured varnish, general dirt in the air. Have you got any idea what it might be worth?
Not really. I seem to remember that about 30 years or 25 years ago, somebody offered my father £250 for it. My sister thinks it was £100, but other than that, I have no idea.
Well, I think this would be worth between £3,000 and £4,000 on the open market.
Very nice.
Is it right or is it wrong?
Yes.
What we're looking at, of course, is a scrimshaw. It's carved on a whale's tooth. For every 100 of these whale's teeth that I see at the moment, perhaps 5 are right.
Yes.
And I'm very pleased to say that yours are right. The sort of thing that a sailor would carve in his spare time, and some of them got themselves to a remarkable proficiency. Some are incredibly elaborate, but I should warn people to watch out for anything which is very elaborate, that say shows Abraham Lincoln or George Washington. Something very American would automatically put you on your guard. But let's have a look at the decoration. A whaling scene on one side, and on the reverse, the whale himself
rather a sort of a ferocious Moby Dick sort of character, isn't it? Let's have a look at the other one. And again, you know, sort of the ship, the longboat, sort of, you could almost imagine Captain Ahab at the front there with his harpoon. But value. The market for scrimshaw has been up and down. I would say today that let's describe them as a pair. I think it's safe to say that they would, at auction, would probably make in the region of about £800.
Well, the Clarice Cliff jug actually was given to my mum by my grandfather. It was something that she had out of the house when he died. Mm-hmm. The vase is actually something that was given to my nan for looking after somebody who was very ill, and when she died, the daughter asked her if she would like anything out of the house, and she chose the vase out of it.
So it's really to thank her for her kindness.
Yes,
in that
that's
way.
right.
Well, the Clarice Cliff piece is a fairly commercial one, which is probably limited in value to about sort of £60 or £80, not anything special. Mm-hmm. But on the other hand, this is very much a special production, being an original design by William Moorcroft. The pattern we call Claremont. It's the design with the individually carved and drawn out mushrooms and the coloured glaze effects. And William Moorcroft had been making these in the potteries at McIntyre in Staffordshire, and the retailers and Liberties in London discovered his work and sold it for quite a good market and encouraged him to make more and more exciting designs for them.
So it actually says made for Liberties at the bottom.
Look, there's the signature of William Moorcroft drawn on there, and made for Liberty and Co. with a registered number, which will put it in about 1908, 1910. Something like that.
It is lovely.
Obviously, did you appreciate that it's an important vase?
We thought it might have some value. We actually had a local valuer around in our village church, and we sort of said, well, yes, you know, if you're thinking of selling it, we would probably give you £500 for it, but he'd no idea, really. He couldn't tell me a great deal about it at that point.
Because I think you'd have to pay a little bit more than that for one like this, because I suppose now the Moorcroft market is so strong, you're looking at certainly 3,000, possibly 4,000.
Goodness me.
So just as well you didn't let him have it at that price.
Absolutely.
And keep dusting it and look after it.
Yeah, that's absolutely incredible. I had no idea it was worth that much. My mother will have a fit.
Well, Paul, this is very interesting. It's obviously a variation on a theme of roulette.
Yes.
But instead of gambling on numbers, rather more interesting, I think, you gambled on the horses.
Yes, it's a night at the races.
And how does it work, really?
Well, basically, it's very like a roulette table, except instead of numbers, you've got horses with different amounts of space on the wheel.
Yes.
And of course, the narrower the space, the bigger the odds against winning. And so the game was called Esmeralda, because Esmeralda takes up a third of the whole wheel, and therefore a 2-to-1 is a common winner. If, on the other hand, you back the bolter at 35-to-1, tiny space, you could win quite a lot. Now, this was an Edwardian parlour game. It exists in a variety of forms. There were small portable versions. This is the most deluxe, splendid one I've ever seen.
Well, shall we give it a whirl? I mean, I think I'll go for bolter, because it's good odds at 35-to-1. So if I put £1 on that...
Well, I'll be more conservative. I think I'll go for Mr. Pickwick at 17-to-1.
17-to-1.
Well,
Well, let's give it a whirl, yes.
I'd rather possibly know more about this one. He probably remembers the coronation, or at least the coronation that never happened, Edward VIII.
And
the 8th coronation late.
yeah. People think that these are terribly valuable because he wasn't crowned, but of course, I mean, they still produced all the material and sold it off, and so the things still exist, even though he wasn't crowned. But people get the impression that this is going to be incredibly valuable, but very, very common.
Well, this is a lovely selection of Third Reich daggers, no doubt all war souvenirs. Yes. We'll take the first one. This one is a German naval officer's dagger, Luftwaffe officer's dagger, Army officer's dagger, and the SA. And the SA, of course, were the brown shirts. Fortunately, they've all got their hanging straps. Now, to value, this makes a big difference. So the approximate values would be 250 to 300, 200 to 250, same for that one, and the SA now about 150.
That one was my husband's father's.
Was it?
And when it came to tying this, he didn't know how to do it, so he had to write to Germany
Really?
And he sent a diagram back of how to tie it correctly.
That's nice. It's beautifully done, isn't it? Yes, that's very nice indeed.
That's called carnival glass. Called carnival glass. Oh, yes. And it was made in the middle of the 19th century, really towards the end of the 19th century, 1860 to 1900. And it was made virtually for what it says, carnivals and fairs.
Oh.
It was very decorative. And so people would... Oh, it's very pretty. It's lovely. Very, very collectible now. The Americans collect it. You get it in orange and you get it in blues, yes, and all sorts of different colours.
Well, whoever's owned this cabinet over the last 100 years has looked after it very well indeed.
Yes,
it's really, really nice piece.
It is, isn't it? Well, we bought it by auction.
Did you?
Yes.
How long ago?
It's about 1930.
Yeah, so you just went along and bid for it, did you?
Yeah. No, it was the last thing to be sold, and
Yeah.
the auctioneer was going away and missed it.
He missed it?
It missed it. And
Yeah.
so it got all his books made up, and so
Right.
as he said, will give me £5 for it. And so,
£5?
Yes. And so...
Good gracious. Why am I never there when these deals are being done?
And anyhow, the wife only had £3.10 with her. And so...
Well, let me tell you, it's got the original lining. All this carving is
it's
in marvellous condition.
Yes,
It's super. The pediment is on. It's about 1890. You're a very lucky man because it's worth about £1,500 now.
Yes.
So you've done all right, haven't you?
Yes, that's all right.
Good.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for
indeed.
bringing it in.
Is it Lurts?
No, it's not outside.
Not marked?
No.
I tell you,
It's a nice one.
if this came up at auction unmarked, it would be bought and it would be back in auction in about 6 months with a Lurtz signature on it, and it would then fetch 10 times what it came at in the first place. It's probably worth around 150 to 200, but if this were marked Lurtz, then it would be £1,500.
He's a pretty ancient elephant. I gotta say, I know he's a bit knocked about, but I don't mean he's ancient because knocked about. But he was made, I think, somewhere around about 1790. He's 200 years old, which is a long time for an elephant to survive, especially being a money box, as it gets knocked about. Have you ever had money in it or found money?
Well, there was something rattled in there.
Yes.
And it turned out to be a halfpenny, when I thought it might have been a golden sovereign.
Oh, yeah. No such luck, just a halfpenny. So he's been a poor old elephant, hasn't he? A lot of people would call it Wealden, the great potter in Stoke-on-Trent, after the particular colour, this washy green colour. But much more typically Yorkshire, which it is this ochre and blue colour around the sides, and also the particular whole style of it. I think is Yorkshire, possibly Don or somewhere like that in South Yorkshire. And he is a bit of a wreck, isn't he? Poor old chap. He's lost a bit of the top of the castle.
And his trunk.
And his back here has been broken. Perhaps someone tried to get money out of him.
Robbing the piggy bank.
Yeah, robbing the piggy bank. Actually, of course, a lot of such things are damaged. It's in a body called creamware, which is a softish earthenware, and they often get damaged. So a little bit of damage on a rare piece like this doesn't matter so much, but it's still a very handsome wreck. And I suppose its value is going to be somewhere about £3,000.
Oh, it's a good thing I'm sitting down.
Yeah, I know, yeah.
It was only 4 years ago when I bought the boat, and it was just before I retired from the sea. I was a fisherman for 28 years.
Working on trawlers?
Yes.
And you wanted a model, to celebrate your own life or your own activity?
I did, yes, that's right, yes.
Now, the magic thing to me about this is the detail. All the detail of the deckwork, the boats with their oars, all the equipment has been individually carved and modelled. Now, the quality of this one is that it all comes to pieces, and layer by layer, secrets are revealed. And if we start here, we can take off the roof of the wheelhouse, and we take that away, and there is you must forgive me if I don't use the correct terms. There are some of the staterooms for the passengers. We go further down below decks, and here inside are the living quarters, complete, I noticed, with bathroom. But if we continue to take it to pieces, we find, again, here is the upper level of the engine room. Down below that, once again, we go into the the bowels of the ship. We find the engine room, the steam engines, the boilers, the coal supplies. In a way, it relates to things like dolls' houses. You know, the interest
that's
in...
what it struck me as.
You thought that?
Like a nautical doll's house.
The feeling of it throughout is that it is a masterpiece by some amateur maker.
Yes.
I don't see it as a professional model at all, not in any way implying that it is crude or ill-finished, but just it has a wonderful simplicity about it. Now, you bought it fairly recently, 4 years ago, you bought it locally. I don't really want to ask what you paid, but I can give you, obviously, a value for it. What do you think it would fetch now?
I would hope that it would be somewhere in the region of £400 or £500.
Well, I can do much better than that. A ship like this, sold perhaps at auction today, might fetch £1,500. And this is because of the quality of the model. You know, a ship model can be anything from 100 to 10,000, depending on the detail. Well, I think it's a delight to see, and I'd love to take it home myself. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Do you know where these two pieces come from?
Germany, I think.
You're right, absolutely right. They're German. We've got a coffee pot, and I think this is probably a hot milk jug. And it would have been, they're not from the same service, funnily enough, although they look very similar. They're from the same factory, Ludwigsburg, but they're from different sets. They date from about 1760, somewhere around there. Ludwigsburg's one of the smaller German factories, and we don't actually run into a great deal of it. And there are collectors of these small German factories. So this one, with a bit of damage on it, a few chips around the rim, is going to be worth about £600 to £800. And this one, which is in really very good condition, about £1,000 to £1,500. Really very nice object. But let's have a look at that.
Yes, I brought the plate.
Which really took my fancy. Do you know what this one is?
No.
Right. Well, the giveaway here is that, which is a tiny little red anchor. And that is the mark of the Chelsea factory. Now, the problem with that mark is everybody copied it. So, of course, you can't rely on it as being Chelsea. But the copyists nearly always made the mistake of making it much too large, far larger than that, and painting it in the middle. And if you see a very small red anchor in the edge of the plate, there's a fair chance it's Chelsea. But there are other clues. First thing is these three spur marks. Can you see those rough patches? And that's where the piece was supported in the kiln when it was fired, like that.
Oh, nice.
And they knocked it off, and it left three little rough patches of glaze. And the other clue is the translucency of the piece. If you hold that up to the light and look through it, you will find tiny little, what we call moons, which are little lighter patches, which we now know, in fact, are little holes, air bubbles, in the body of the piece, and it makes it look thinner. So we're definitely looking at a piece of Chelsea. And this red anchor mark lasts from about 1755, 1760, and that's what we're looking at. So it's even older than the coffee pots. It's very attractively moulded with this feather moulding, well painted, and people look at them and say, how clever of Chelsea to just haphazardly throw the branch there, and an insect there, and another one there, all sort of unconsidered. It's not right. They had to consider very carefully, because Chelsea porcelain was not actually a very good paste, and it was full of flaws. And if you get this in the right light, can you see this rough patch under there?
Oh, yes.
When this was fired in the white, before they put the colour on, it went horrible and bobbly. So they painted a plum over it so it didn't show. If you look at this beetle here, in the middle of his back, he's got a hole. And a nasty hole appeared in the porcelain, so they painted a beetle over it. And that is absolutely characteristic of Chelsea.
Yes.
I think that's an absolutely charming plate, in very, very good condition. That's going to be worth £700 to £1,000.
My mother calls it her plate because the antique dealer that gave my father those gave her that plate. So she refers to it as her plate.
Well, you want to hang on to it now you've got it.
And that is why they call it concertina action. This double hinge, which enables the frame to come out, form a rectangle, support the top when open. Always the mark of good quality.
Yes.
Have a look at it together here. I like to look underneath. An oak base, which is good, lovely dark colour. I like the hinges particularly, where you can see they were made to be screwed on.
Yes.
But the cabinet, the maker, put in some iron handmade nails, and they've lasted from the early part of the 18th century. And then these little hooks, quite original. Nobody was going to see it, really.
Yep.
But that's the sort of thing they did in the 18th century. And another guide, and I say this so many times, the thickness of the veneer. When you look at the side next to you...
Beautiful
yes,
veneering.
and that edge, you can see right around the top. Very, very good. Typical 18th century. And in fact, I suppose George the Second, early George the Second period, card table. OK, let's turn it over.
This veneering is what wood?
Well, now, this is laburnum. Terribly rare. And very striking. You normally would expect to see laburnum veneers cut that way of the grain, or as you cut a French loaf of bread, about 45 degrees, and creating oysters or ovals. In this case, it is cut straight down the grain, and you can see the little tiny markings indicating lots of little tiny branches. Typical laburnum, which is a devil of a job to cut. I've got some my grandfather had, and it's like a bit of iron. Absolutely, it's so dense. And then it's cross-banded, heightened with cross-banding, and in between interspersed with green and a white boxwood line. And it's a turret top form. This is excellent.
Yes.
A nice sort of rounded turret at the top, carried on through the frieze, a nice little formal leaf cap to the tapering leg, which terminates in quite a plain pad foot. Inside, then we have the mark of good quality. These dishes here to take either a decanter or a candle on each corner, and then, of course, the traditional money wells to put your spoils in. And a very, very fine example. And it's been in the family a long time.
Yes, 1922 I first remember it, but I think my grandmother had had it many years before that time.
Right, right. And you still use it?
Yes, still every day.
Wonderful, very good. And
Bridge
now I
in the
have...
evening.
You play bridge on it?
Yes.
Good. Now, obviously, we've got to talk about values.
I've no idea what it might be worth.
Today, it's probably in the region of 10 to 12,000 pounds.
Would it really? Yep. Oh, well, I'll have to teach my bridge companions not to put their dirty glasses on it.
Don't plonk yours into mine.
Well, it's me now.
They're wonderful, aren't they?
Yes.
Do you have these out at home?
I do. I have them on my grand piano.
Ah, they must look wonderful on a grand
They do
piano.
indeed,
Absolutely
yes.
perfect. Obviously made for a grand house or, I don't know, a French brothel or something. Terrific, I think. They are... The colouring would suggest a date around the beginning of the 20th century.
Yes,
when
yeah.
they like these pastel tones. And they're vaguely Meissen in feel. But not from the Meissen factory. If we can have a look at this one. We may have got a mark on the bottom here. Yes. That mark is a factory called Plough on Havel.
Yes.
In Thuringia. And they made these elaborate construction pieces, table centerpieces, figures and so on. But I've never seen pieces as large and as dramatic as this from Plough on Havel. I mean, they are exceptionally good.
Yes.
And they seem to be in pretty good condition, don't they?
Well, the boy's lost his stave, or his little stick.
Yeah, well, that could easily be restored. But I mean, that's the only damage, isn't it? I think with these on top of your grand piano, you could pretend to be Liberace, couldn't you, really?
Beautiful, aren't they? I'm happy to bring them.
Well, I think they're going to be worth somewhere in the region of £3,000 to £5,000. So, really very nice.
That's beautiful, yes.
It's a family thing?
Yes. It's been in my family at least 40 years that I know of, about 40.
And various children have used it over those years.
Yes.
It was probably made in southern England, somewhere, once tempted to say in the High Wycombe area, but certainly in Buckinghamshire somewhere, in the very early years of the 19th century, somewhere about 1830 or 1840. A Windsor stick-back armchair with a lovely pierced splat, but the thing that really gives it away as far as its early date is this stretcher, the curved stretcher, which is called a crinoline stretcher. And that went out by the middle years of the century, so it's certainly early on in the century. People do collect these things, child's furniture in general, and of this early date, I should think in a sale this would make probably roughly £300. It's a jolly nice example of a child's chair of that date.
Now here we are in Cleethorpes, and the one thing we have to see is the leaking boot. I gather he's the local fountain, the town symbol.
Yes.
And here we have him in porcelain, made in the 1920s, a commemorative piece. Unfortunately, in this case, the water doesn't quite drip through the boot, but nonetheless, he's a symbol of the town, and I think, as I say, the vital thing to see. It's a Goss type of piece, and the current value, of course, at its peak here in Cleethorpes, would be 40 to 60 pounds. If I saw it in Exeter, I wouldn't have recognised it. Of course, it would have been cheaper there. But of course, it is the vital piece that we should see on this day here.
This absolutely charming, romantic Victorian painting is in fact by an Italian-born artist, Charles Edward Perugini, who was born in Naples, but who came to London in the 1860s and painted and lived and studied here. Can you tell me something about the painting, how it came to your collection?
It's not mine. I went to visited a lady's house the other week, and I admired this just hung in the hall, and I suggested that it was worthy of bringing to the Antiques Roadshow, but she didn't think that it was, and she's allowed me to bring it today. Yes. But her late husband bought it years ago at an old house auction in Yorkshire, and that's all. She doesn't know what he paid for it or what.
No. Well, indeed, it's very, very beautiful. Perugini is thought to have studied with one of the greatest Victorian painters, or the classical Victorian painters, Lord Leighton. He certainly is recorded as receiving financial assistance, and he is thought to have worked in his studio. I think you can see his influence in the beautiful painting of the ears and of the hands here. I think are almost the best part of the painting. The condition of the painting is almost perfect. It's been protected by glass, which sometimes makes it difficult for people to see. And in fact, under the glass, you can see there's dirt, and the painting ought to be removed and the glass cleaned from the inside. But there's a little bit of discoloration, but that's only in the varnish, and with a gentle clean, that picture would look absolutely pristine. The nice thing I think about it is it has been left untouched. The frame and the nameplate are all original. Now, as a question of value, I would have thought that it was worth something in the region of between £3,000 and £5,000, and possibly ought to be insured for somewhat more.
Sure.
So I hope that your friend will have a nice surprise.
Yes. Yeah, thank you very much.
Well, it was bought in a job lot by my father straight after the war, with a few vases, a couple of pieces of furniture, and that's all I can tell you, really. Just came into the family from that way.
At first glance, from a distance, you think, what a wonderful piece of Oriental work. Wonderful piece of Japanese cloisonne, but we're actually looking at Gay Paris.
Gay Paris?
For the simple reason that this piece, believe it or not, is French. It's by the firm of Christoffel, a top French metalworkers, and of course they were a top maker of silverware right through into this century. Date-wise, here is the date 1874. And by the 1860s, 70s, the influence of Japanese art was creeping into Western art. And the French were one of the first to pick up on it. And so this type of object is regarded as being Japanese. Let's have a look at the object itself. I mean, everything's full of symbolism. First of all, the clouds. These are celestial clouds all along the rim. It's all cast in gilt bronze. And then we've got the body itself with these wonderful Japanese red, these crested cranes, and that lovely wave motion. The other thing is the handles. Look at this handle. Now, I've seen this particular crane before as a mon. Now, when I say a mon is the Japanese equivalent of a coat of arms. But of course, it's been taken by the French and adapted and stylized and put into the form of a handle. The thing itself sits on typical feet, 3 short feet, and it rests upon this magnificent pedestal with this lovely blackened enamel bronze. It's made up of bamboo, and they couldn't resist turning the feet into sort of hoof feet. It's a sort of it's a strange anomaly, if you will.
Yeah.
Have you given thought to the value yourself? Have you got it insured?
various friends have looked at it and they've all sort of said Oriental and hazard guesses from about £2,000.
Right. Well, if at auction, I would probably see the bidding starting at 2,000, going to 3,000, 4,000, 5,000, 6,000, 7,000 at £7,000, 8,000, 9,000, £10,000 at £10,000. At £10,000, I think it's fair to say you just might see it go.
10,000?
Now, the only thing I haven't sold is a crystal ball, so I can't guarantee, but it's a magnificent object, and if I dare paraphrase John Bly, it's the best I've ever seen on the Antiques Roadshow.
Oh, well,
thank you for bringing it in.
Thank you very much.
It's a satinwood table. It's a Pembroke form, and it's painted decoration. Now, the problem with this type of furniture is that it was popular at two main periods. The late part of the 18th century, 1775 through 1780 through to the end, and again in the 19th century. And really, it can be quite difficult to differentiate between the two from just simply looking at it. The problem arises because there's a great deal of difference in the value. So we have to do a bit of detective work to find out which is which. I'm going to take the drawer out first, and then ask you if you'll be very kind to carefully tip it up on its back legs, no further than that, up. And now we can see underneath here a nice shaped serpentine rail to fit, fixed in by 3 handmade steel screws. Further down the other end you can see the hand saw marks, not a band saw, but hand cutting down there. And you see it starting to crystallize. There's a sort of crystallization on the surface of the timber. Now lift up the leaves, drop down, and we look then at the hinges straight away, and these follow, but whereas those have not been exposed to the air,
yes.
A little tiny bit of grease originally would have kept them free of rust and oxidization. Here, they've gone rusty, and those hinges, which are original, set in there, have never been moved. The tops of the screws have got the same uniform patina. And then supported on 2 loopers. You see how that pulls out. It actually, you can hear it squeak on that.
Yes.
It's created that polished effect. Compatible signs of wear, just wouldn't get it on a 19th century table. That's a dream. I mean, you know, there's enough to talk about to persuade anybody that that is an 18th century table. Now, the next thing we will look at is to confirm that with the general view of it. And one comment may be that the legs are a little bit sturdy, a bit stocky. And so they should be. For a table designed as this was 1785, you would expect to see that. Later, by 1800, those would have been very fine, very delicate. But these aren't. A good, solid, beautiful, proportioned leg with a sort of circular top continuing right the way through, and the original painting. The painting has contrast in it. It is not uniform throughout. You get the sort of Gainsborough-type ribbon, lovely splashy roses, and then all of a sudden, the most delicate little chrysanthemum, a work of art. That is a little miniature work of art. I think it's wonderful. Now, let us just turn it around that way a bit, and I want you to pull out your leaf. And now look at that shape. Not a straight line, it's just wonderful shape. I was going to say the best example of its type. There can't be many better pieces of furniture of the late 18th century in this form. So, now tell me, how long have you had it in the family?
Well, it's been in the family just over 40 years.
Right.
It was left to my grandmother, who was a lady's companion, and she worked down in Maidenhead. And the lady, who of course died, passed it to my grandmother, and then she insisted that it was passed down to me to go sort of through the family.
Wonderful. That is absolutely perfect. So it's going to stay in the family?
Oh, I hope so.
Well, that's good. That's good.
Yeah.
Do you have any idea now of its value?
None whatsoever.
Well, you would certainly get in the region of £20,000 for it.
Sorry, take me back a bit.
And for insurance purposes, I would think 25 to 30,000. For all the reasons I've explained to you.
That's fantastic.
Well, it's made my day as well.
It's fantastic.
I somehow think that this little bowl would appeal to my younger daughter. A very pretty little thing. attractively decorated with, I don't know, pixies or hobgoblins or something playing leapfrog. And in the centre, we've got fairies and more flying pixies, an owl, and there's even a batty bat there. This is called Fairyland Lustre, and it was made by Wedgwoods in the 1920s and 30s.
Oh.
Did it come into your family at that time?
Yeah, no. I 43 when
43?
I was married. It was a wedding gift.
Well, you were given, if you like, a second-hand thing at that time, but it was a jolly nice present for all that. I mean, it'd been made probably in the 1930s, and somebody thought that it would be an appropriate thing to give you, and I think they did rather well. And these were designed by a lady artist at Wedgwood called Daisy McCaig-Jones, and they are now really very sought after. It's a very clever process. They used to transfer an outline, fill in with colour, and then on top of that, they would print the same print they started with in gilding. So it appears that the gilding is framing almost like a stained glass window. Quite a complex and difficult process. And she was a complex and difficult woman, I understand. Yes, she was.
Well, I've always loved it because it's so pretty.
It is very pretty.
Very pretty.
I think it works extremely well.
Yeah.
Do you imagine it's of any great value?
Well, I've always had it out, you know, and not really. I mean, I know it's a good thing.
It's a good thing.
But...
It's a bone china, and they are very thinly potted, and they do break very, very easily. And they can also suffer from thermal shock, which means that you can have it sitting in a window, and it gets freezing cold overnight. And then either the sun comes up in the morning, or your central heating comes on, and they'll crack of their own accord. So you actually have to be quite careful with them.
So it's done very well to survive.
It's done very well. It's not damaged at all. It's in perfect condition. I love it desperately. I think it would probably fetch somewhere in the region of £700 to £1,000.
Good gracious.
Shock, isn't it?
It is a shock.
Nice wedding present.
Very.
Even second-hand.
Oh, I must put it away, I think.
I think you'll have to. Thanks for bringing it in.
Well, thank you very much indeed.
Wonderful. Well, you know, the best way to describe the sort of enthusiasm we found here today is to tell you that the first person in the queue was actually outside the front door at 10 minutes past 4 this morning. That was sometime before dawn, and during our day we've seen between 3,000 and 4,000 people and the most enormous variety of antiques, from which I suppose I'd obviously single out Eric's Jardiniere behind me, John's furniture, and I think that David's description of the Chelsea Red Anchor period was about the best few minutes on that I've ever heard. We're off now to pack our bags, and we're moving south to Surrey, where we'll be at the same time next week, and I very much hope you'll join us. So until then, from all of us here on Humberside,